but I train my body to be the best animal it can be. And that involves, complete physical fitness, diet, sleep, interpersonal relationships. It involves everything that makes me the best, athlete or animal I can be.
All right, welcome back to Lionheart Radio. I'm your host, Rick Alexander, founder of Lou Aviv in San Diego, California. And my guest today is ultra running legend Dean Karnazes. He's completed 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 consecutive days. He is one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. Author of Ultramarathon Man, 50/50, Run, and most recently, a book I just finished up reading, The Road to Sparta, where Dean chronicles retracing the original legend of marathon. Dean, thanks for being on today.
Oh, thanks for having me run by.
You must have a ton of those. So, one thing I'm really interested is I read Ultramarathon Man back when I was 19 in 2006. And at the time, it seemed that ultra running was kind of still a fringe sport, maybe budding. But now it seems trail running is almost in vogue. And it's, I did a 200 miler this past weekend and there was 200 of us there ready to race. So it's definitely a bigger sport than I think a lot of people realize. What has that been like for you from those first days when you were kind of getting into it and found out it was something that exists to what it is now?
Well, I like the way you say, I did a 200 miler last weekend, and it just kind of rolled off your tongue as though it was nothing. And I think that's one thing that I've noticed is that we ultra runners have this kind of lingo that is, when third parties hear us, kind of scratch their head like, what did this guy just say? He ran, is he doing a 200 miler? What does that mean? I mean, sure. Most people don't like driving 200 miles. I don't like driving 200 miles, let alone running there. So the community of ultramarathoning has, like you said, has grown tremendously. It's still a very small base of runners, of people that are willing to, attempt something like this, but it's become more of a kind of a mainstream, entity, a known entity, and more mainstream consciousness in the U.S. and especially in abroad. I've noticed Europe. Ultramarathon is really, really popular.
Where have you found it to be the biggest? Is it still the biggest in the United States?
No, I would say it's probably not the biggest in the United States. I mean, I just did a race in Portugal, of all places, and the scene in Portugal is amazing, the ultra running scene. And I was the only American there. I think I was probably the only. There's probably some Spaniards, but I was probably definitely the only American, and probably one of the only international athletes. And this race filled up in 2 days, same sort of thing. It's like, Western states, only there's no lottery, but I mean, it filled very, very quickly. And this is just, a random ultra marathon. It wasn't like a big marquee event by any means.
So if you show up in an ultra marathon, actually, I was at an ultra marathon you showed up to this year. I was at the North Face Endurance 50 miler in DC. And when you show up, everybody knows exactly who you are, because you definitely had a huge hand in building the sport, I think, to what it is now, at least the following. When you show up to these races in other countries, is it much the same, where people are kind of grabbing pictures with you and you're more known?
It's extraordinary. And I think it's because of my books. I mean, my books are in print in, I think, 19 or 20 languages now. So people, Ultramarathon Man is a very intimate book. As you know, I tried to write from my heart. And I think it just appealed to a lot of people because it was, you probably could relate to it firsthand, because a lot of the emotions I wrote about, you've experienced yourself. I mean, we're kind of like-minded, right? We're kind of kindred spirits in our beliefs, our philosophies, the way we like to push our bodies. And even if you don't speak English, when you read about this in a different language, there's a band of brothers and sisters just like us out there, and they relate. So
yeah,
when I show up at an ultramarathon, I mean, I don't speak Portuguese, but I'm surrounded by Portuguese, and they're very physical there. They're all wanting to hug me and, thank me. And it's the same way when I go to Australia, when I go to some Asian countries. It's really wild how I have this incredible following in certain countries. And I think it's just because there's a lot of like-minded people that have read my books.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first read Ultramarathon Man, I wasn't a runner. And in fact, I don't think I ran one time for fun outside of, being forced to for lacrosse or football or whatever. But when I was 19 reading it, I remember that the biggest realization I got out of it, and I don't even know if you're going for this, but it was the fact that so many of us mistake being comfortable for being happy. And once you're awakened to that realization, you start noticing all the different places in your own life that it shows up. And then not only that, but the lives of people around you that you love, that it shows up. You see these people that are constantly making decisions based out of comfort and not based out of what might give them that lasting happiness.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I think that we've built a society where we're so comfortable, we're miserable. I mean, there is no struggle. There is no hardship in our life. Let's face it. I mean, in my life, in a normal day, I don't have to do anything physical. I don't have to do anything that's demanding of me in any way. All the creature comforts are provided. And that level of comfort creates a complacency, almost, look at the levels of depression and mental illness in America as well. And I think it's largely because we have no struggle in our life. We have no, nothing is painful. Nothing requires effort. And I think these, you might call it an artificial trial, a marathon or an ultramarathon, but having these things to accomplish gives a sense of purpose. And it gives someone who doesn't have to experience pain a lot of pain, and the ability to overcome that pain and to realize the gratification from overcoming that pain.
What do you think it was that drove you, and I know you do chronicle about this in Ultramarathon Man, but what do you think it was that drove you to that first run that you had, that one that's well told about when you were drinking on your 30th birthday? What do you think it was? Do you think it was that need to find discomfort?
I think it was bad tequila.
Okay. You might be the only person that's ever had that reaction.
Yeah. I think for those listeners who haven't read my book, I basically walked out of a bar drunk on my 30th birthday and decided I was going to run 30 miles because I hated my life. And I pretty much followed the prescription for happiness in our society. I went to college, I went to grad school, I got an MBA, I had a really cush corporate job in San Francisco. I had a 401k matching plan. I had stock options, a company car, healthcare, all the big perks, fat paycheck. And I thought if I had all these things, I'd just be happy for the rest of my life. And I was miserable. I just hated my life. I hated going to business meetings. I thought it was just all so contrived and simple and easy that I wanted something intense and I wanted to struggle. And I thought, running 30 miles right now is going to be something that's hard to do. And let's try it. And I think that it just all culminated in that night with that final shot of tequila.
Right. And were you this is actually just a random weird question, but were you drunk while you were doing this run, or did you sober up about halfway, or how did that go for you?
Yeah, no, I was, when I walked out of that bar, and, to be honest, I didn't have running gear. Thankfully I had these silk, boxers on that were kind of comfortable. So I just took off my pants. I thought, run in your boxers. I was running in like gardening shoes. And for about the first 10 miles, I was inebriated and I didn't feel much. And then I started sobering up and I thought, what the hell am I doing? This is ridiculous.
Right.
And it just felt right though. It was like 2 a.m. I was out in the middle of nowhere by myself. The stars were out. It was just like this perfect moment. And I thought, you were meant to be here. Then all of a sudden I sobered up very quickly and it became this sort of surreal experience, almost like a religious experience where I just kept kind of floating along running. And I ran 30 miles that night without having run, a mile for the past 15 years. And I pulled it off. The next morning wasn't pretty, but that particular run after I sobered up, it didn't hurt that bad.
Right. It's like the most extreme form of meditation you could have found.
I think it was. I think it was just this epiphany, and maybe 30 is too young to have a midlife crisis, but I really think I had some sort of crisis. Maybe it was a spiritual crisis where I just thought, how are you going to spend the rest of your life? What life do you want to lead? I don't know why at 30, kind of the writing was on the wall, but when you get to that point, let me know how you feel.
Well, I'm 30 this year, so I think, yeah. I had, when I was, I had read your book and I was going through some things in my hometown and before I had joined the military or whatever. And I actually had a very similar, I ran I think it was like maybe 25 or 26 miles. I was like, going through high school breakups and all the things that seem like a big deal when you're a kid. And I ran like 3 towns over, and I remember having to have my parents pick me up. But I had a very similar moment. It was just a long time ago. So you mentioned within your run that you had never run before that. You'd only ran like a mile before that. So or had never ran even a mile in the 15 years preceding that run. And I'm sure at this point you've had a lot of different studies done, based on your physiology. Have they come up with physiological differences that allow you to run for these long times? Now, in a trained athlete, it's one thing, but at a drunk 30-year-old who's untrained up to that point, it's an entirely different experience. Is it all grit, or is there actual physiological difference that sets you apart from maybe the general population?
I think that it's a combination of a couple things. I don't think there's just one thing, but I think that I have very good biomechanics. So my alignment is really good. I don't pronate or supinate. I run just kind of as a runner's supposed to. And that, you don't, that's hereditary, right? You kind of inherit your biomechanics. They always say the best thing you can do as a long distance runner is to choose your parents well.
Yeah.
So they've also noticed that I don't accumulate lactic acid. So, at a pace that's brisk but not a sprint, they've said, man, you seem to be able to run forever. Like you don't accumulate the kind of things that hold people back. And lactic acid, is a byproduct of cellular respiration that tends to slow you down. And they just said, you're amazing that, we've had you on this treadmill now for an hour. We thought we'd get to this inflection point after about 10 minutes, like most athletes. And it just doesn't seem like we could keep you here forever. And theoretically, if you had enough nutrition coming in, you could just go forever. So that's one thing they've noticed. The other thing I think is experience. You learn how far you can go from failing, right? So, you just said you did you complete the 200 mile? Let's talk about that.
I did. Yep.
Yeah. So, the first time I ran 200 miles, it was, I first had run 100 miles. Then I ran 135 miles, the bad water. And then I ran a 200-mile relay race solo. And until you push yourself that far, you don't realize you can go that far. And you learn a lot through experience, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever DNF'd. I've certainly DNF'd. And I've learned a lot through DNFs at kind of where my limits are and what I need to do to move beyond those limits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I did. I DNF'd in my very first 100-miler. And then I didn't run another 100 until this 200. It was an interesting journey.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like people would ask me like what hundreds I had run, and I'd be like, well, I'll tell you in 30 miles when I finish this one. But no, I ran the Tahoe 200. It was an awesome race. I don't know if you've ran any of Candace Burt's 200 milers, but they are amazing. So, one of the questions that I get a lot just from running, and I can imagine that you've gotten it so much over the years, is, people like to tell you like, oh, all of that long distance running can't be good for you. How has your body held up over the years? A lot of people, even after this last race are like, oh man, you're going to be hurting really bad when you're 50, 60, 70. But when you look at ultra running as a sport, there are quite a few people that run really well into their 60s. And I'm curious, for you, how has your body held up over the years, your joints and your physiology?
Well, I mean, I know it's unusual, but in almost 2.5 decades of doing this, I've never had an injury. So I've never had an overuse injury. I've lost toenails, as we all have.
Sure.
But I've never had anything that sidelined me. And so I think that says a lot about, the human body and the capacity to withstand these sort of distances. I think if you put me up to someone else my age and you compared our kind of any reasonable stats that compare health, I would be well and beyond above what another person my age is. I mean, as far as like, lean muscle mass, overall body weight, typical, resting heart rate, these would all be excellent indicators that, what I'm doing is really not that bad at all. In fact, it might even be beneficial. I've had, my joints x-rayed, I've had MRIs done, and they've said, you've got the joints of a 20-year-old. So I really don't think that running is deleterious, especially if I do a lot of cross training, as I know you do. I'm a big proponent of HIIT training. I've been doing that for years. So I don't just run. I think if you just run, that might be a little problematic, but I train my body to be the best animal it can be. And that involves, complete physical fitness, diet, sleep, interpersonal relationships. It involves everything that makes me the best, athlete or animal I can be.
And what does your cross training look like?
Well, I have this a HIIT routine that I developed with a buddy of mine who was actually an officer in the Navy SEALs. So it's a series of push-ups, pull-ups, dips, burpees, and it's about a 12 to 15-minute routine. It's pretty intense, and I probably cycle through 5 or 6 of those throughout the course of the day. So I do all my writing, all my corresponding, all my interviewing. Like I notice you're sitting down right now. I'm standing up as I'm interviewing. So I never ever sit down. I think sitting's toxic, and I do this HIIT training as well as my running. So sometimes I run. I do the hard easy sort of thing when I run. I never do the same run twice, and I typically do something pretty big and then something a little bit more muted the next day, and kind of cycle that way versus doing the same thing every single day.
With somebody like yourself, and I might be just speculating, but do you find that it's hard when you're trying to stick to a training plan for a certain event? Do you find it hard to stick to that plan because at the end of the day, you kind of just want to run maybe partly therapy, just to be out there, just to be doing it?
Well, I've got to be honest. I unfortunately I don't have consistent training blocks like I would like because of my travel schedule. I mean, I'm on the road constantly now and internationally as well. So I'm more of an opportunistic sort of trainer where if I've got, an hour, 2 hours, I'm going to kill myself in that amount of time to get in the workout I need to get out or get in. So I really don't have these big blocks of time where I can actually focus on training. And when I have pretty good discipline. Like I know if I go big the next day, even if I could go big, I try to hold myself back or at least work out different muscle sets. I mean, if you run a hard race, you can do upper body. Even though your legs are destroyed, you can do a lot of upper body work. And so I try to balance out things in that regard.
Okay. And what about your diet, just to round out the physiological aspect of Dean Karnazes? What does your diet look like?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, people can change. And I've certainly changed with diet. I mean, I know in my first book, I talk about, ordering a pizza while I was out on a run and eating an entire pizza as I'm running. And now I've gone full circle. So now I'm kind of a, paleo guy. If I can't pull it from a tree, dig it from the earth, catch it with my hands, I don't eat it. I don't eat any sort of refined and processed food, nothing in a bag. You're probably too young to remember Jack LaLanne, but do you ever remember the guy, Jack LaLanne?
I do. Legend, yes.
Yes, Jack LaLanne. He said, if man makes it, don't eat it. And if it tastes good, spit it out.
Yeah, that guy was ahead of his time, for sure.
He was something else, yeah.
When you talk about your stride being so on point and that being some of the reason, you run like humans were meant to run, do you ascribe to the philosophy that of the minimalist shoe of trying like maybe the zero drop technology to force your gait to be better?
I subscribe to finding what works best for you. So I always tell people, listen to everyone, follow no one. Personally, I do subscribe to minimalist because I can run a minimalist. I remember my high school cross country coach used to have us run from the high school track to the beach, stash our shoes in the bushes and run barefoot along the sand. So he said running barefoot really conditions your foot. And then we'd come back to the infield of the track, the grass, and he'd make us run barefoot again. So he was a big proponent of barefoot running. And I love running barefoot on the beach. I don't think we're engineered to run barefoot on man-made surfaces. Sometimes I see guys running, road marathons barefoot, and I think that's probably not so good. I don't know if that's the kind of pounding we're meant to endure. But as far as running barefoot on soft surfaces, I really subscribe to it. In fact, I tell people, even if you don't run barefoot, when you get back to your house, walk around your house barefoot. Take your shoes off.
Yeah, sure. Just strengthen the bottom of your feet, if nothing else. So, chapter 1 of The Road to Sparta opens up with a touching, actually really well written story because it pulled me in really hard, actually, on some of the side effects of American culture. Even as the sport grows, like we talked about, and as trail running and ultramarathoning seems to grow worldwide, have you seen a same trend? Have you seen that exact same trend with the general population? Because to me, it seems like even though the sport's growing, the general population is still somewhat declining in health.
I would say as there was, I remember in technology, like Bill Gates was talking about the digital divide, where he said people are being separated by, their adoption of technology, and they're separating either into the kind of haves or have-nots. I've noticed the exact same thing with fitness, especially when I travel across America. You just don't encounter someone that's average anymore. There's no like normal body weight people out there. They're either incredibly fit, kind of, the small percentage is moving toward like we are, or they're just the opposite. They're big, they're overweight or obese, and they're not active at all. So you just don't see any average people anymore. And I've really noticed that trend growing, especially in this country, over the past decade.
What do you think that is? Do you think it's just people are either migrating toward this lifestyle or maybe even migrating toward technology? Because, technology inherently allows us to be lazier.
I think it's largely what I've seen is geographical. So it's like-minded people that are kind of pulled together that adapt the same kind of values and mores. So, in San Diego, obviously, people are fit. I mean, if you walk out the door in your neighborhood, you're going to see a lot of fit people. People are running, people are exercising. If you're in certain places, I don't want to name places in the, across the U.S., but if you're certain places in the U.S., it's just the opposite. You don't see anyone running. You don't see anyone working out, and everyone's kind of not in very good shape. So I think it's more your peer group who you're hanging out with and kind of your local community that's influencing you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I travel obviously for the military a lot, and you know when you're in a town that doesn't see runners very often.
Yeah.
One of the ways it seems like you've kind of tried to tackle this population is with with your charity, with the Karno kids. In your estimation, what do you think is the best way for us to tackle this pseudo complex problem? Because I care about this problem. I know that you do, and the listeners do as well. So do you think that targeting the youth is the best way to try to fix what the mess that we're kind of in?
Yeah, I do. I mean, one person can only do so much. And I thought, you've got to focus your efforts. Where do you focus your efforts? Well, try to influence the future. And that was kids. And what I found is kids are more impressionable as well. So if you can create an environment for kids where they can run, kids naturally love to run. And if you can structure running as play versus, go run 5 laps around the track, if it's more structured like play and fun, they're more willing to do it. So that's kind of been my approach with Karno Kids, my foundation. And, I get letters and emails from kids that, that like I would give a talk at their school when they're 7, 8 years old. Like when I ran across America, for instance, I ran one time from Los Angeles to New York, and I stopped at 15 schools along the way. I get letters and emails from these kids now, like saying, wow, you ran into our gym, you're midway running across the country, you gave a little talk, we got to run a mile down the road with you, we kind of waved goodbye as you kept going. I'm now like running high school cross country, and I'm the number one varsity athlete on our team. I get tons of letters like that. So I know that kids are impressionable, and just sometimes it's one exposure to something that they're not used to seeing. Like they're not used to seeing some guy running across the country,
right?
And running their gym in running gear. He's not a teacher, he's not a principal lecturing to him. He's just a fun guy that's running by. And the impression that makes on kids has been remarkable.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of that is just reframing, what people think is possible. Just giving them an outlet to show like, hey, this is a lifestyle that's available to you. And them just even knowing that that's possible might open up that door for them to hopefully walk through at some point.
Yeah, I need you to get my foundation. You understand it.
Okay. And what about the money though? When you raise money, like, so the inspiration is one point. Where have you found the money to be best served and used?
The Karno Kids, we basically are what they call a pass-through organization. So I just am the front man to solicit funding, and then I vet organizations that have actual programs that they implement. Like there's one called Girls on the Run that's a fantastic national running program. It targets inner city at-risk youth girls and teaches them self-esteem and camaraderie through running. And the program is remarkable. I used to serve on the board. I've been to a number of the events. They call them lollipop runs, which is the final culmination. They run a 5K after a 10-week training program. And a lot of these girls are crying it's such an emotional thing for them to actually complete something. So a lot of them come from broken homes, and they've never seen their parents ever accomplish anything. These girls, dedicate 10 weeks of their life to training, and they finish a 5K, and they get a medal around their neck. And it just shows them with, with sacrifice and commitment and dedication, you can reach a finish line. So Girls on the Run is one of the beneficiary organizations we support, and that's a really good one.
That's really cool. You mentioned just beforehand running across America and running into schools. What is it that pushes you to come up and try these new challenges? Like, from the 50-50 to the latest challenge with the Road to Sparta. What is it that kind of pushes you to do these things?
Well, I love competing. I love competition. I love, like I said, I did a 100-mile last weekend. Not a 200-mile like you, but I did a 100-miler. So I love jumping in competitions. But I think that I also like structuring these zone as well. And these are more like adventures, if you will. Running 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days. It was an incredible adventure. It was a great road trip. I took my family along. I got to run, running across America. I wanted to see America, and I thought, what better way to see America than at 7 miles an hour? So it was just more of an experience than a hard and fast race. And I really love adventure, and I love exploring and traveling. I just try to combine all of those elements into these physical quests, and that's kind of how I come up with the things that I come up with. I don't ever say, like, how am I going to one up this last one? I just say, what would be the coolest adventure in the world? Dream it up and then go do it.
I remember at one point you were talking about running, I think it was across the Pacific Ocean. Is that still a thing?
Okay, let me tell you about that, Rick. So okay. I had run in this thing. It's called the Hydro Bronc, and it was like an inflatable hamster wheel. And it was designed by this inventor that if someone had broken through the ice on a frozen lake, you could get in this thing and reel out, kind of roll it out to them. And if the ice broke underneath you, you just float over the top and keep going. So he contacted me and said, you want to try this thing out? So I ran it at one time on a lake, and it was fun. And I thought, maybe I can run a marathon in this thing. Maybe I can run from Long Beach, from your kind of area, a little bit north of you, to Catalina Island, which is 26 miles. So I thought maybe I can run a marathon in that. And so this reporter from Runner's World was interviewing me, and she said, "Oh, I heard you, ran in this thing that ran on water, and what are your plans for that?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about, trying a marathon." And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, what? Just a marathon?" And I said, "Oh, whatever. I'll run to Hawaii." It was just a joke. And they put it in the article, like, now he's planning to run to Hawaii.
Well, it probably helped. It probably helped grab some allure around the myth. Is it? Do you still stand by sleeping 4 hours a night, or has that kind of had to change over the years?
It's by necessity. I sleep 4 to 5 hours a night just because I don't have that much time, and I am traveling is extremely disruptive for sleep cycles. Again, my dad only sleeps 4 to 5 hours a night. And, it's not because he's waking himself up, that he just doesn't sleep much. So I think that just by nature, I don't sleep much. But that said, I know athletes, the guys I train with, great athletes that sleep, 10, 11 hours. If they could sleep 12 hours, they would. So I would say just, doesn't everyone follow no one. And I also think that, I wake up naturally after 4 or 5 hours. I think that forcing yourself to wake up with an alarm is probably the worst thing you can do. If you can sleep in and just let your body naturally wake, I think that's a really good thing.
I remember when in February when I saw you at the North Face Endurance 50 miler in DC, you had just run the London Marathon the day before, and I'm like, what the hell is with this guy? An animal.
It got better from there because after that night after I saw you. I got on a red eye and flew to the Big Sur Marathon. So I ran the London Marathon, deadheaded to DC, ran I think I only ran the 50K. I'm not sure I ran the 50 miler in DC, but then got on a flight right after that and flew out to Big Sur and got up the next morning and ran the Big Sur International Marathon.
Of course you did. That 50 miler, that 50 miler was deceivingly hard, actually.
It is, isn't it? Those three, you got to do those three loops when you get out there, and I've done it. I did it last year, and it's pretty daunting, and it's not. Those hills are relentless, aren't they? I mean, there's not a lot of flat. I mean, you're either going up or down, and yeah, no. But congratulations on finishing that.
Yeah, yeah. No, my thought was like I was thinking compared to out west, this is obviously going to be nothing, and yeah, you're right. You get out to those three big loops, and once you finish them, you're still only 35 miles in, so you got to finish it. It's a different animal. Just to give the listeners a little bit of an idea about, we've thrown all these numbers out. How much have you ran at one time? Like, what would be the longest distance you've run if you've kept track?
Well, one time I ran running across America, I ran 3,000 miles, but that was over 75 days. So one time I ran 350 miles nonstop, kind of like your 200 miler. It was the same sort of thing. It was 350 miles. It wasn't in Lake Tahoe like you were doing, so it wasn't nearly as hilly. It was all in the Bay Area, but that was the furthest. And it took me 80 hours and 44 minutes. So 3 nights without sleep.
Yeah, so that's essentially double what I did in 80 hours. So, was that a sanctioned event, or is that just something you'd done?
No, it's part of a race called the Relay. So it's part of a 200-mile relay race, and I added on 150 miles to get to the start of the relay, and then ran the relay because I wanted to make sure I ran an actual course where I had all it was marked. The first part was by myself, and then I was running with a lot of people. But I had a news crew that was following me the whole time.
Did you find yourself hallucinating at all on the third night?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. The most vivid hallucinations I've ever had have been during the Badwater Ultramarathon out in Death Valley, and for some reason that race, it's just surreal out there. The moonscape of it, as well as the heat. And I've never had more vivid. I've had hallucinations out there actually talk to me, which is bizarre. That's the only place in the world where I've, had a hallucination, say something to me.
Yeah, no, that is bizarre. The hallucinations that I got from the 200 kind of went away once I looked close enough.
Yeah, you probably see, did you see snakes, or what did you see, like lights that look like right in your face?
Yeah, I kept seeing runners.
All of a sudden you realize.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think the hardest maybe race or experience you've had has been running? Like, can you describe that experience a little bit?
I ran last summer. I ran across the ancient Silk Road. So I ran 560 kilometers across Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan with very little support along the way. And those were some of the toughest conditions I've ever experienced because of the heat. I mean, it was getting up to about 110, really dry heat, really windy. So it was very dehydrating and no ice at all. So kind of relying on just, warm water in a bottle, get through this thing. So it was really a psychological kind of warfare to know that you had to run, 50 miles on kind of flat surface with just water throughout the day and maybe some nuts.
Yeah.
Just really primitive food. Yeah.
Do you typically try to train for all of the different austere environments? So if you're going to run Badwater, obviously you try to do a lot of work. I don't know if you ran in a sauna, or I read some stuff about you just wearing a lot of different clothes. Do you typically try to tailor your training to the different, adventures and austere environments you're gonna face, or has your general fitness been such enough to kind of carry you through these different adventures?
No, I absolutely train specific for these races. So like you said, with the Badwater Ultramarathon, I'll run around in the middle of summer with like my North Face parkas on. I'll do sets of push-ups and sit-ups in the sauna at the gym. When I run in snow surfaces, I typically go to the beach and run on the soft sand because I found that running on soft sand kind of conditions you for soft snow. So I'll run on the sand. When I ran, like I've done a number of these self-supported races, so these, like the Four Deserts Challenges. So they're, 6-day multi-stage 250-kilometer races that are self-supported. So you got to carry everything you need, basically. So I'll spend a lot of time, like I'll go grocery shopping. I'll run to the store with a backpack on, fill it with 35, 40 pounds of food, gallons of milk and everything else, and then run home with the backpack, because I mean that's basically what you're going to be schlepping through the desert, the Gobi Desert, in a couple weeks. So that's how I train for those things.
And do you find your body does respond pretty quickly, whether it's heat or cold? Does it respond pretty quickly to training for the extremes, or does it take a while?
Yeah, no, my body responds really well to heat, and thankfully I am sponsored by the North Face. So when it comes to cold, like I don't have any body fat like you. I mean, I've got 4.5% body fat. So when
Nothing
it comes
like
to the
me.
cold, when it comes to the cold, I layer up. So I'm good at layering. I've got my systems pretty dialed. Like I know how to put on the right clothes, what to wear for certain temperatures, just through experience, through doing it for so many years. But I'm not very good with the cold. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, self-supported race, that's something I haven't even delved into, and it seems like a whole other animal because I rely so much on those aid stations.
Yeah, you seem like a natural for self-supported though, but you're right. Part of the challenge of that is you're eating freeze-dried food for 6 days. So, you're just eating crappy food, and you can carry, I mean, you can bring whatever you want, but you got to carry it. So, the lighter the better. So you're just relying on, 2,000, you probably have to rely on about 2,500 to 3,000 calories a day, the bare minimum, just to kind of stay in homeostasis to get you through the next day. Because the more stuff you have in your pack, the heavier it is. And so it's kind of tactical in that regard. I think you'd enjoy it just with your background.
And the water, do you have to carry enough water as well? That seems like the hard part.
Well, the trick, you're given 3 liters of water a day. So that's one thing you're provided is 3 liters of water and a tent at night. But the thing with me, I don't need a lot of water, and I'm small. I was feeling bad for the bigger guys that sweat a lot, because I'm thinking, I can get by just fine on this. For them, they're going to be in a constant state of dehydration. So it favors, the slighter runner, the smaller runner.
Sure. Have those efficiencies just developed in you kind of over the years through your because of just putting on so many miles and training those efficiencies, or have you always kind of been that way?
No, I think it's hereditary. I think that I'm very vascular. I'm from the southern Mediterranean. I'm 100% Greek, and it's amazing. I train with guys that are elite ultramarathoners, and they're drenched in sweat, and they're like, you don't sweat. I just don't. I don't know what it is.
Just an animal. What do you want your legacy to be when people read your books and they hear this interview or come across you in an article? What do you want people to leave with? What do you want people to think about when they think about Dean Karnazes?
I think, man, that's a good question. I think that they just think that, he was just a guy who lived the life the way he wanted to, on his own terms. Like he just did whatever he wanted to do. He kind of followed his own path. I mean, let's face it, I could have been a business guy. I probably would have been, way more successful than I am as an ultramarathoner. But I chose to follow my heart, to be true to my own self. So I think that's kind of the thing I would hope people would say is, and I think from reading my books, I've just given people permission to follow their dreams. Like, hey, this guy's doing it, I can do it as well. So if I can inspire one person to kind of follow their own course through life versus kind of going with others prescribed, that's fine with me. Yeah.
And when you turned 30 and you started realizing this whole life that that you would be into and that you started following your heart, as you say, did you meet a lot of resistance? Because it's an easy thing to say and not always an easy thing to execute. So when you were trying to build this life for yourself, did you meet a lot of resistance?
Thankfully, my family was very supportive, and I care about my family the most. But you're right, I did meet quite a bit of resistance. I mean, my boss couldn't believe I was resigning from this job. I mean, he thought I was crazy.
Right.
And I mean, even today, I was at a dinner party this last weekend, and some guy, asked me, "What do you do for a living?" And how do you tell the guy what I do for a living? I mean, I kind of said, "Well, I'm an ultra marathoner, and I do some writing, and I've got sponsors." He's looking at me like, "You're a flake, right? You're homeless or something."
Yeah, right.
He just said, "All right, dude, get out of my face. Let me go find someone worth talking to." So yeah, you still run up against that.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting in my experience. A lot of times, the people that are in the rat race, they might have something negative to say when you're kind of following your own path, and deep down they want nothing more than to be able to follow their own path.
I think there could be a tinge of jealousy and admiration there as well. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, for sure. So the Lionheart Kicker is the final question we try to ask every guest, and it's based on advice. So if you were given a platform, which actually you kind of built your own platform, but for the sake of this question, if you were given a platform and it were guaranteed that what you said would be translated into every language, everybody would hear it. They might not all follow your advice, but they would definitely hear what you told them. What would you tell people?
I would tell people to not take themselves or take life too seriously, to laugh a little bit, to laugh at themselves and laugh at life.
Have you always been that way, even pre-ultramarathon days?
No, I used to take myself too seriously, and I used to take life too seriously, and I think that's why I say don't do these things, just because I've been there.
Yeah, sure. So for people that are listening to this and they want to follow along with you and your journey and support what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
I just Google Dean Karnazes. I mean, I've got a website. I'm on social media. However, if you follow Twitter, you can follow me there. If you like Instagram, but I'm out there like everyone else. So we're easy to find. Everyone's easy to find these days. Yeah. For better or for worse. Yeah. Yeah,
that's true. And we'll have all of your website and all of your books linked up in the show notes of this episode. Do you have any idea what might be next for you? Any big challenges?
Yeah, well, the 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days was such a great adventure. I'm hoping to take that same footprint globally. So I want to run a marathon in every country of the world in 1 year. So to set out on a global expedition, there's 203 countries, and run a marathon in each and every one of them. So I've been working with the U.S. Department of State and the UN to get passports and permits to get into all these countries. But that's kind of my stretch goal.
Damn, that's awesome. Well, when you get ready to venture to the Middle East, let me know. I might know some things.
Pick a country or two and come join me.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy and you have a lot going on. I really thank you for sharing your story with our audience.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Rick. I appreciate it. And congratulations on that 200 miler. That is a heck of an accomplishment. So congratulations.
Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track and delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcome. If you have any comments on the show or would like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshit. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest. Cleveland.